As we are all here talking about oil prices and what this could do to the economy, we are not hearing the kind of rhetoric from the president we usually do about the U.S. going in, taking over oil markets, trying to profit somehow from a very expensive conflict. Why do you think that is?
Well, partly, Christina, because advisors around him are pointing out exactly what you just laid out, that the energy markets are very rattled by this conflict. You have U.S. service members being killed. You just mentioned he's going to Dover later today. It is the gravity of the situation is such that his advisors, also some allies in the region, have advised him that focusing on anything other than the mission at hand is only going to exacerbate the situation, and particularly the economy that's been so rattled by this because the Strait of Hormuz is closed, because of the fact that, Qatar cannot produce LNG at the moment and don't know when they will resume. So all of those factors leading to gas prices going up in a critical midterm election year. And the White House just does not want to rattle things even further. And so any talk from the president of the United States about going in, claiming energy, claiming the oil in Iran, that could really just dump fuel on the fire, no pun intended. And so that is why he's kind of steered clear of that for now.
For now, Jeff Mason, we read a little bit from the president's post this morning, and I'm very curious as we watch guests arrive at this summit that's taking place at the president's Gulf Resort in Florida, the Doral Gulf Resort, officials and leaders from Latin America. Your sense of what the president means, difficult to parse a tweet for concrete details about what a mission might entail, but perhaps you can help us understand the change in tone or what we should read into what the president wrote this morning about what's likely to happen over the course of the day.
I mean, I think what you can read into that is that he's irritated that Iran is not just bowing to his will. And he has, they decided over a week ago to stop negotiations because U.S. officials concluded that Iran was not seriously willing to talk about giving up its ballistic missile program and was still intent on pursuing a nuclear bomb. So that was what led, in part, at least, to President Trump making the decision to start the military action. Then in the course of this last week, he has encouraged, I think he did it again yesterday, or at least the day before, he has encouraged the Iranian National Guard and police and everyone who's fighting to lay down their arms and give up. And that's just not what the Iranians are doing. And so that's annoying to him, irritating to him. And as a result, he is changing his rhetoric and saying that we're going to increase our attacks even further.
Nancy, I want to ask you, because this war is hitting quite close to home, and it's been getting some interesting reactions from Trump's base, the MAGA base. As you write, quote, the Iran war has emerged as a grave political vulnerability for Republicans ahead of a midterm election in which they're counting on the voters who delivered Trump a second term to keep their party in majority on Capitol Hill. Trump's agenda on everything from spending to trade will be hamstrung if Democrats wrest control of even one chamber of Congress. Is there a way for Trump and Republicans to get out from under this, or is this a huge problem for them going into November?
Well, I think it's a large problem for them going into November because, as Vivian said earlier, we're facing potentially higher energy prices. And also, just more philosophically, this is not what the MAGA base signed up for. They signed up for a president who had an America First agenda, who did not want to get embroiled in conflicts in the Middle East. He was very critical of President Bush's incursion into Iraq. He was very critical of President Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan. His message as a candidate since his 2016 campaign has been no more forever wars. It's a much more isolationist message. And now we've seen him really engage in a lot of military intervention, first in Venezuela, now in Iran. His advisors are also eyeing leadership changes in Cuba. And so it's just a real philosophical break with what the MAGA base expected for him, and they're not happy about it. You have a bunch of MAGA voices like Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly making a lot of noise. Some Republican lawmakers are privately quite worried about this. And so, it's just another thing along with the Epstein files, along with the economy, where the base is not really happy with the job that he's doing.
Can't commend this piece enough. MAGA is split. Trump digs in on Iran war, divides loyalists by Nancy and Josh Green, our colleague here at Bloomberg. And Nancy, I'm curious, you say they're making a lot of noise, the likes of Megyn Kelly, Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the now former representative. I'm curious sort of how they see their currency at this moment. I think there's been some dismissiveness from this White House about the criticism that they've gotten. We certainly saw that in the context of this war powers vote that took place earlier this week. Thomas Massie, the Republican from Kentucky, chief proponent of that. Do they feel like this moment is different, the MAGA crowd, and do they feel like they have the currency here to kind of change or make a difference in terms of the way the president sees some of these issues?
Well, I think the MAGA crowd is making a lot of noise right now. I think the question is that typically, this MAGA crowd does fold and get in line with Trump. We've seen that with tariffs. We've seen that with some of the things that have happened with immigration, with the 2 people who were killed in Minnesota. And so my question is, if the war continues in Iran and if it's a multi-week thing or a multi-month thing, or Trump ends up putting boots on the ground in Iran, do they come into the fold at some point to support Trump as they have in the past, or are they going to keep making noise? The other thing I will just say is that the Trump coalition from 2024 that brought him back to power of voters is a very fragile coalition of white working class, young men, black men, Hispanics. And we've already seen that group of voters fray a little bit over the last, 8 months or so. And so it's not just these influencers that Trump is trying to hold on to and appeal to. It's really also the coalition of people who returned him to the White House in 2024. Can he motivate those people to go to the midterms? And I think that's an open question with his foreign policy moves.
Vivian, I want to go back to you because you and I actually first met covering the first Trump administration when that administration was focused on the Western Hemisphere. We met on a trip with Vice President Pence, and Vivian very kindly let me have the cool seat near the door of the helicopter with the door open. She's a lovely colleague. But
I'll never forgive you.
It's okay. I regret it, but I don't regret it.
Giving it to you is probably generous. Yeah.
But even on that trip, like during the first administration, we had this administration trying to kind of pivot to their backyard, right? We talked about these spheres of influence, and it's almost like the pivot to Asia that we've seen with successive administrations. The Trump administration keeps trying to pivot to the Western Hemisphere, and yet we're back in the Middle East again. And you've got some reporting and some insight into where this might be going next. And that sounds like they are seriously thinking about talking to Cuba, making inroads in Cuba, taking action in Cuba. What are we doing?
I mean, the president has made no secret of the fact, and I know that Nancy just alluded to it as well, where he told CNN's Dana Bash yesterday in a phone call that Cuba is next on his list and that talks are already underway to make that happen. About a week ago, he mused to journalists over a friendly takeover of Cuba. They've made no secret of this. They do believe that the time is right for a Cuba operation and that this would be really kind of critical at cementing the president's legacy. If he could have taken care of Venezuela, toppled the clerical leadership of Iran, and then possibly removed the post-Castro communist regime of Cuba. They believe that this is a trio of accomplishments that would really kind of put him there above the legacies of presidents like Reagan or Jimmy Carter, Richard Nixon on the foreign policy front. Now, of course, as my colleagues laid out, it has been very unpopular among his base. And this is one of the big struggles is that, on the one hand, he is essentially a lame duck president who is thinking about his legacy. And on the other hand, we are in a critical midterm election year, and he has to think about, keeping, bolstering those Republicans that right now are struggling in the lead up to this year's midterm elections because the economy has been struggling because of all these other factors as well. And so the president, is being told by his White House advisors that we need to get back to focusing on issues like affordability and the economy. But he's really found his footing, if you will, on these foreign policy issues, and he believes that they've been going extremely well, despite the fact that the war in Iran is very much in play, and there's really no telling how long it will last or how successful it will be. He's already eyeing this third target.
Jeff Mason, let's talk a bit about messaging, internal and external messaging. So picking up on what Vivian was just talking about there, who are the advisors to President Trump who are advising him to do this? And indeed, how does it complicate his messaging case going forward externally? Nancy laying out the degree to which this is landing flat with a lot of the president's base. As we see gas prices going up so significantly here over the last few days, talk about the complicated nature of messaging this foreign involvement to the U.S. electorate broadly.
Sure. Well, a couple things. First of all, if I'm ever on a trip with Vivian, I hope that she gives me the good seat.
There we go.
But second of all, both Vivian and Nancy laid it out really well. And Nancy's points about MAGA, at least part of MAGA, raising concerns about this creates a huge political risk, of course, for the president going into the midterms. That said, I think it's really important to note that it takes a lot for the president's base to part with him. The biggest political thorn in his side, at least with regard to his base over the last year, has been the Jeffrey Epstein files. And even with that, they are still supporting him. And I think the polls show largely still supporting him right now with the war in with the war in Iran, despite, of course, some vocal outliers who are public voices like Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly, as Nancy referred to. In terms of messaging, David, to your question, part of it, what we've seen from President Trump is he likes to claim ownership of MAGA. He will say things along the lines of, "I am MAGA." And so far, that's worked pretty well for him. If he says more or less, "Hey, just do this because this is what I want," in most cases, they fall in line. Outlier again with the Jeffrey Epstein files. I think it's TBD whether they completely fall in line with this war. And that, as Vivian was saying, will depend entirely on how successful it ends up being and how long it goes. And the third piece, to what extent it has long-term economic ramifications on gasoline prices, on inflation, in ways that will affect people's votes and pocketbooks as they're going into the polling booth in November.
First of all, Jeff, karma did come for me because Vivian then stuck me in the middle seat for the entire flight back, and it was a very long flight.
Go.
So don't worry, I got my comeuppance. Nancy, before we go, though, I do want to ask, what does the president do if he loses the midterms?
Good question.
How does he handle that?
Well, what we're expecting and what his advisors are expecting is that Republicans will lose the House. That is what they privately think. And they think that they will very narrowly hold on to the Senate. And so, if that's the case, we're going to end up with divided government. There will be a ton of investigations into the Trump White House, cabinet members, corruption. Trump could be impeached again. And so, if he does lose the House, it's going to be a whole different last 2 years of his presidency, one that will be dominated by investigations, having to set up sort of war rooms and lawyers to deal with that. And that's really what we saw during the first Trump term as well. The last 2 years of his presidency were dominated by dealing with those issues. And that will be part of his legacy, just as he now views these nation building foreign policies incursions as part of his legacy.